How did one of the smallest countries in the world survive when all the giant empires around it wanted to destroy it? Welcome to my channel. In today's history documentary, we explore the unbelievable story of Luxembourg. For over 1,000 years, giant nations fought for this tiny land. Yet, somehow, against all odds, Luxembourg never disappeared. Let us uncover the secrets of how this tiny nation survived and became one of the richest places on Earth. Today, we begin our story at the very start of Luxembourg's history. Many centuries ago, in the year 963, Europe was a very dangerous place. Small towns were constantly attacked by strong kings and local lords. At this time, a nobleman named Count Siegfried came to this region. He looked at the steep cliffs and the rocky hills near the Alzette River. He saw that this location was naturally protected by high stone walls made by nature itself. Picture a giant rock surrounded by deep valleys on three sides. Count Siegfried knew this was a perfect place to build a safe fortress. He traded some of his own land to get this giant rock, known as the Bach. On top of this rock, he built a small castle called Lucy-Linberhoek, which means little castle. This small castle was the humble beginning of the nation we now call Luxembourg. But why did everyone want this small piece of rock so badly? The answer lies in its location. Luxembourg sat right in the heart of Western Europe. It was located at the crossroads between major trade routes and powerful kingdoms like France and Germany. Whoever controlled this high rock controlled the main roads of Western Europe. Think of it like a giant guard tower in the middle of a grand battlefield. Because of this, Count Siegfried and his family grew more powerful over time. They expanded their lands, added more soldiers, and strengthened the castle walls. For almost 400 years, the House of Luxembourg ruled their own territory with great success. In fact, 4 members of this family even became emperors of the Holy Roman Empire. They were no longer just small castle owners, they were shaping the history of all Europe. But as the family grew more famous, the castle itself needed better defenses. Enemies were always watching, waiting for a chance to attack and take the fortress. So the rulers began building massive stone walls, deep ditches, and thick watchtowers. Imagine walking through dark underground tunnels carved deep into solid rock. These underground passages are called the casemates. Over hundreds of years, soldiers dug over 20 kilometers of secret tunnels inside the cliff. Inside these tunnels, thousands of soldiers could hide, store food, and fire cannons at enemies. This made Luxembourg almost impossible to conquer by force. If an enemy army tried to climb the cliffs, soldiers from above could stop them easily. If an enemy tried to surround the castle, defenders could survive inside the rocks for months. People across Europe began calling Luxembourg the Gibraltar of the North. Just like the famous Rock of Gibraltar in the south, Luxembourg was considered an invincible fortress. Remember, in medieval times, having an invincible fortress meant survival. Because it was so strong, every major power in Europe wanted to own it. France wanted it to protect its northern border. Germany wanted it to stop French armies from moving east. The small rock castle was no longer a quiet home. It was now the ultimate prize of European warfare. How could a tiny population maintain control of such a valuable castle? It took them to be very smart, patient, and strong-willed. Luxembourg survived its early years by building a natural shield of stone. Remember, but stone walls alone cannot stop giant armies forever. Darker clouds were gathering, and the real test was about to begin. Welcome to part 2 of our history series on Luxembourg. As the Middle Ages came to an end, Luxembourg faced a completely new kind of danger. The small county was no longer fighting small neighboring lords. It was now surrounded by massive European empires. In the 15th century, the powerful Dukes of Burgundy invaded Luxembourg and took control. This was the beginning of 400 years of foreign rule. Imagine living in a small home where different powerful strangers keep moving in and taking charge. After Burgundy, the famous Spanish Empire took control of Luxembourg. Spain wanted the fortress town as a military base to guard their territories in northern Europe. Then came the Habsburg Empire of Austria, followed by the ambitious French Empire under King Louis XIV. Why did these huge empires keep fighting each other for this small piece of land? Because Luxembourg was like a key that unlocked control of the entire continent. King Louis XIV sent his best military engineer, a genius named Vauban, to Luxembourg. Vauban looked at the fortress and decided to make it even more dangerous and strong. He built gigantic stone walls, massive outer forts, and underground bunkers. Under his direction, Luxembourg became one of the most heavily fortified places on the surface of the earth. But all this military engineering came with a terrible human price for the local people. Every time a new empire wanted to take the city, they brought huge armies to surround it. Imagine living inside a city while hundreds of heavy cannons shoot iron balls at your home day and night. Families suffered from starvation, diseases, and total destruction of their farmland. During the famous Siege of Luxembourg in 1684, French cannons destroyed entire streets and neighborhoods. Yet, despite centuries of destruction and foreign rulers, something remarkable happened. The people of Luxembourg never lost their unique identity. They did not become fully French, nor did they become fully German or Spanish. Instead, they kept their own local language, culture, and traditions alive inside their homes. Think of their culture like a small green plant growing in the cracks of heavy stone walls. No matter how heavy the stones were, the plant refused to die. They used a clever strategy to survive under foreign rules. They obeyed the laws of whichever empire was in power, but stayed quiet and united among themselves. During the late 18th century, Napoleon Bonaparte and his French Revolutionary Army marched into Luxembourg. Napoleon added Luxembourg directly into the French Empire as a small department. Once again, the local people had to adapt to a new master, new laws, and new taxes. For 4 full centuries, Luxembourg was traded like a prize between the world's most powerful nations. It seemed impossible for such a small group of people to ever gain their own freedom. But history always holds unexpected turns for those who endure. The fall of Napoleon was about to open a totally new chapter, leading to a surprising diplomatic twist. Welcome to part 3 of Luxembourg's incredible story of survival. In 1815, Napoleon was finally defeated at the Battle of Waterloo, changing Europe forever. The major winning nations gathered at the Congress of Vienna to redraw the map of Europe. What was going to happen to the small, heavily fortified town of Luxembourg? Neither France nor Germany wanted the other side to own this powerful fortress. So the European leaders came up with a very strange and complicated compromise. They created the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg and gave it a new leader, the King of the Netherlands. However, to make things even more complex, Prussian soldiers were placed inside the Luxembourg fortress to guard it. Imagine living in a country ruled by a Dutch king while German soldiers occupy your town fortress. It was a strange situation, but it allowed Luxembourg to stay alive as a distinct territory. In 1839, another big event happened when Belgium broke away from the Netherlands. Luxembourg was split into two parts. The western part went to Belgium, and the eastern part stayed independent. Luxembourg lost more than half of its land, making the country even smaller than before. How could such a tiny remaining piece of land survive without falling apart? The real crisis came in 1867, known in history as the Luxembourg Crisis. Emperor Napoleon III of France offered a huge sum of money to buy Luxembourg from the Dutch king. When the King of Prussia heard this, he was furious and threatened to start a massive war with France. Imagine two giants getting ready to fight a devastating war right over your small backyard. The survival of Luxembourg hung by a delicate thread. To stop a catastrophic war, the great powers of Europe held an urgent meeting in London. They signed the famous Treaty of London in 1867. This treaty contained a revolutionary idea that saved Luxembourg from total destruction. First, Luxembourg was declared a permanently neutral nation, meaning it could never take sides in wars. Second, the Prussian soldiers had to leave the fortress forever. Third, the massive fortress walls and underground casements had to be completely torn down. Picture workers spending 16 long years breaking down giant stone walls that took centuries to build. Many people thought destroying the fortress would make Luxembourg weak and helpless. But in reality, tearing down the walls was the smartest step toward true independence. Without a military fortress, Luxembourg was no longer a valuable prize for armies to conquer. By losing its fortress of stone, Luxembourg gained a fortress of law and international treaties. In 1890, Luxembourg finally got its own local royal family, the House of Nassau-Weilburg. For the first time in over 400 years, Luxembourg was fully independent, with its own sovereign ruler. The tiny nation had outsmarted giant empires through diplomacy and international law. But the 20th century was approaching, bringing two of the deadliest wars in human history. Welcome to Part 4 of our historical series on Luxembourg. By the early 20th century, Luxembourg was a peaceful and quiet country, protected by international treaties. But in August 1914, the dark clouds of World War I covered the continent of Europe. The German Imperial Army ignored Luxembourg's legal neutrality and marched directly across its borders. They wanted to use Luxembourg's roads and railways to quickly attack France. Imagine waking up in the morning to see thousands of foreign soldiers marching through your peaceful city. The young Grand Duchess Marie Adelaide and her government were trapped and powerless to stop the invasion. Because Luxembourg had no army to fight back, they chose a policy of strict passive resistance. They protested against the occupation legally while keeping the local economy running to feed their people. For 4 long years, German troops controlled the nation, taking food, steel, and valuable resources. When World War I finally ended in 1918, Luxembourg was free once again, but its political situation was fragile. Just 22 years later, an even greater and darker threat appeared on the horizon. On May 10, 1940, Nazi Germany launched a sudden and aggressive invasion of Luxembourg in World War II. This time, Adolf Hitler did not just want to occupy the country, he wanted to destroy it completely. Nazi leaders declared that Luxembourg was an integral part of Germany and banned the local language. Think about being forbidden from speaking your native language or wearing your own national symbols. The Luxembourgish language was banned, schools were forced to teach Nazi ideology, and young men were forced into the German army. But the people of Luxembourg refused to let their nation die quietly. In August 1942, workers across the country organized a brave national general strike to protest forced military service. This was one of the very few public general strikes against Nazi rule in all of occupied Europe. The Nazi regime reacted with severe violence, executing leaders and sending thousands of citizens to concentration camps. Despite the extreme danger, underground resistance movements grew inside the country. Secret groups hid escaped Allied soldiers, printed illegal newspapers, and passed secret military intelligence to the Allies. In September 1944, American troops marched into Luxembourg and liberated the joyful nation. However, the war was not over yet. In December 1944, Hitler launched his final desperate attack, known as the Battle of the Bulge. Heavy fighting destroyed northern Luxembourg, turning beautiful towns and villages into piles of burning stone. Yet American soldiers and local resistance fighters held the line and defeated the enemy forces. Luxembourg paid a heavy price in lives and land, but its courage proved that size does not define strength. Having survived 2 world wars, Luxembourg learned a vital lesson. Total isolation was no longer possible. To protect its future, this small nation was about to help build a brand new united Europe. Welcome to Part 5 of our documentary on the survival of Luxembourg. At the end of World War II, in 1945, Luxembourg lay in physical and economic ruins. Northern villages were destroyed, farmland was ruined, and thousands of families were left homeless and hopeless. How could a tiny nation with limited resources rebuild itself from such total destruction? The answer lies in hard work, smart economic choices, and international cooperation. Long before the war, back in the late 19th century, workers in Luxembourg discovered rich deposits of iron ore in the southern soil. They built massive modern steel mills, and Luxembourg quickly became a major steel producer for the entire world. Imagine giant roaring furnaces melting metal day and night, turning a quiet farming nation into an industrial powerhouse. After World War II, steel production provided the essential money needed to rebuild homes, roads, bridges, and schools. But the clever leaders of Luxembourg knew that relying on steel alone was far too risky for their long-term future. If global steel prices dropped or demand fell, the entire national economy could collapse overnight. So what did Luxembourg do to secure its economic survival for future generations? They decided to reinvent their entire national economy from scratch in a bold new way. In the 1960s and 70s, Luxembourg transformed itself into a major global financial center. They created favorable banking laws, strict privacy protections, and attractive rules for international businesses and investors. Picture financial institutions, global corporations, and major international banks from all over the world opening offices in this quiet European city. Soon, Luxembourg became one of the top financial hubs in all of Europe, managing billions of dollars in investments every single day. At the same time, Luxembourg made another brilliant strategic move that changed European history forever. Luxembourg's visionary leader, Joseph Beck, realized that small nations could only survive if European nations worked together in harmony. Luxembourg became a founding member of the European Coal and Steel Community, which later grew into the modern European Union. Imagine a tiny country sitting at the exact same decision-making table with continental giants like France, Germany, and Italy. Because of its central location, peaceful reputation, and neutral spirit, Luxembourg was chosen as a premier home for key European institutions. Today, important bodies like the European Court of Justice, the European Investment Bank, and the European Parliament's administrative offices are located in Luxembourg City. From a humble medieval fortress town, Luxembourg transformed into one of the official administrative capitals of a united Europe. By shifting smoothly from agriculture to heavy steel, and then from steel to international finance and European governance, Luxembourg proved its incredible ability to adapt. Flexibility, adaptation, and open international cooperation became the ultimate keys to its national survival. But how does Luxembourg maintain this world-class success today? And what important lessons can the world learn from its unbelievable story? Welcome to the sixth and final part of our history documentary series on Luxembourg. Today, Luxembourg stands as a shining global example of modern prosperity, peace, political stability, and high achievement. It consistently ranks as one of the richest countries in the world per person, offering its citizens an unbelievable quality of life. How does this tiny nation of around 650,000 people maintain such extraordinary success in the modern world? The modern miracle of Luxembourg rests on three main pillars: unity, cultural diversity, and continuous innovation. First, Luxembourg has warmly embraced people from all around the globe. Today, nearly half of the people living inside Luxembourg are international residents who came from other nations. Imagine walking down a street in Luxembourg City and hearing Portuguese, French, German, English, and Luxembourgish spoken all around you in harmony. Instead of seeing diversity as a threat, Luxembourg turned it into a major economic and cultural superpower. Tens of thousands of workers cross the borders every single day from neighboring France, Germany, and Belgium to work in Luxembourg. This tiny nation has become the vibrant economic heart of an entire cross-border European region. Second, Luxembourg continues to look boldly toward the future by investing heavily in new high-tech industries. It has developed a world-leading satellite communications industry with pioneer companies like SES, connecting global television and internet networks. Think about a tiny nation on Earth launching state-of-the-art communication satellites into outer space. Luxembourg has even created forward-thinking legal frameworks to support future space mining and clean, green technologies. It refuses to stand still, always searching for the next big opportunity to remain competitive on the global stage. Third, despite all this rapid modern progress, Luxembourg has never forgotten its rich history or unique national identity. The ancient stone fortress ruins and underground casemates are now carefully preserved as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. People still proudly speak Luxembourgish as their national language, keeping their heritage alive for future generations. Their famous national motto says, "We want to remain what we are." This simple phrase sums up their entire thousand-year struggle for survival against giant neighbors. They adapted to powerful empires, survived military occupations, rebuilt from total war, and reinvented their national economy multiple times. Yet through every hard trial, they kept their core spirit and independence unbroken. The story of Luxembourg teaches all of humanity a powerful and lasting lesson about world history. Greatness is not measured by the physical size of your army, the expanse of your land, or the power of your weapons. True greatness is measured by wisdom, resilience, strategic adaptability, and the determination to protect your freedom.
Luxembourg survived because it knew when to build strong walls, when to use clever diplomacy, and when to welcome the world. Against all historical odds, the tiny fortress on the rock did not just survive, it conquered the future. Thank you so much for watching our history documentary series. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more deep historical journeys. See you in the next episode.